Hello, so today I'm going to talk to you about the positive effects of music lyrics, even in today's world, where even though some of the words that they're writing about is vulgar or vulgar subjects or very sensitive subjects, you can still take those around and show how it's creating creative and positive ways of influencing people, even though what they're doing could also be taken really wrong. So first, I'll start off with the positive messages, and music is a very powerful way of relieving and receiving those powerful messages. Music, the way you can write your music is the way from the heart to from the brain. Also, they're very strong, meaningful messages that you can take from one person to another. One person that might not take those same lyrics, receive them the same way someone else does, because everyone takes them a certain way, and it's very powerful for them way. There was a study done for the University of Sussex where they would listen. A lot of people will listen to the song "Help" by the Beatles, versus songs that also have less meaning to them. And the people who took the song "Help" and actually, took it with full meaning, they actually became very good people, and they became a lot more empathetic. They were a lot more considerate of how other people feel. And it also, music is also a very creative way of releasing what you feel inside. So, for example, a lot of big name rappers around now, they kind of release of, talk. They might not be talking about the most appropriate subjects, but Eminem has always talked about something very appropriate, especially to people that felt the same way he was. So, for example, the song "Lose Yourself" from the soundtrack 8 Mile, he used words to express himself the way he was, both in the movie and how he is in real life. So, if you compare it to the movie, he wanted the rap, but he wasn't very strong about it. He was very shy. So that kind of let him lose. That literally meant he was losing himself to become something very strong and meaningful, and to use him, release it the best way he possibly can. Talking about how he's releasing the cage off him. He's breaking his outer shell and releasing how he actually feels. Music also connects people of a lot of different a lot of different generations and genres. Some person can listen to rock music, someone else will listen to rap, but the meanings of the lyrics can mean similar ways, just different ways of producing the same words, and it connects people. That's how a lot of friendships get built with a lot of people who are music fans. They start talking about the different ways that music's helped them, how many different ways they've taken the different words they've heard. People don't just listen for the music just to listen to it and say, hey, yeah, I'm listening to this song. It's nothing much. If they're listening to music and they listen to it regularly, they found some kind of meaning in those lyrics. I'm very passionate about that. As someone who's been in music since he's been in fourth grade, as someone who's in bands constantly, I can understand that fully because my lyrics, I want them to reach someone else out there. I want them to feel what I'm feeling because they can't have any kind of say, or that's how they feel, and so I am helping them have that say. Also, music lyrics are also your freedom of speech. This is protected by your First Amendment. Being able to write how you feel, how to be able to sing how you feel. Yes, they're challenging ways of getting it out there, but none of them can be taken from you. It's all part of your first right. It's your freedom of speech. There's something very protected for you. And then to the people that feel like they're abusing that First Amendment by talking about the different kind of sensitive subjects, there's ways you can filter that. A lot of there's regulations on TV and radio stations, even on the internet, where they have to have some kind of clean version of it, and you can find that anywhere. you know yes, not everyone's going to listen to clean lyrics because it blanks some of it out, but you can still get to it and it still has the same meaningful messages. Just the when they use the stronger words, it's just something they feel that adds more to it, which which is very true because it does add more of a meaningful message if you're adding those because they're such high level words that if you wouldn't say them if you actually didn't feel anything like that. There was a student in Mississippi, well, a couple students in Mississippi, sorry, that they got in trouble for openly using the song lyrics. And I can understand, wanting to punish that because not every you can't just say that in a normal everyday public, but it shouldn't be something punished, be super punished, because it is their freedom of speech, being able to say that, being able to repeat the lyrics that they heard and they like, not just so, they can just get punished for what they like. Social illnesses. So this is where people come in, and this is where the stereotypes come in. Not everybody and not everyone who makes music, even like in rap industry, are bad people. A few artists make songs that people don't like listening to in public, or people in older generations say, "Oh, why do you listen to this? This is not music. This is trash." Well, not everyone's like that. It's a very strong stereotype. And then so and then even with the rappers, they have to be good at English. That a lot of people are comparing, a lot of English majors are comparing the way they write to how Shakespeare used to write, and that you have to be really good at English to really know that. And it just shows that even though they might not be focusing on school 100%, they still have the school being focused on. Music genre shouldn't just be generalized. Next up is the culture. Artists that are coming out nowadays, they're focusing more on their struggles, and so a lot of the genres like R&B, hip hop, and rap, they're all towards the black generation, black cultures, because that's who created those. That was the way they were able to release how they were feeling, all the different emotions, how they were feeling. Not everyone could listen to artists like Jay-Z and Beyonce, but they speak emotions to the ones that know their pain and have felt their pain. Even if it's not even now, if it's just something that happened in the past and it's like, hey, we're bettering ourselves now, so this is looking a lot more promising than it was. They're speaking about the issues of their culture and how it's gotten better or gotten worse. So now over to the counter arguments. A lot of people, like I said before, stereotype music and now they're calling it gang music. I can understand it though, because they have the songs that talk about money, sex, drugs, women, and coming from a parent's point of view, just listening to the lyrics and not really paying attention, it can sound really vulgar. And the way they sound, like when they say they're shooting people up or dropping out of school, and students are listening to that. Now, as a parent, if someone who'd have kids, not saying I do, I can understand, they wouldn't want them to drop out of school. But let's say they dropped out of school like their idols did. If not everyone makes it out in the industry, so they'd have to understand that, and they would learn that the hard way, but they would still have to understand it. It might not be the best way to learn it, but they're still going to learn it. And they even had an interview with a former gang member, Derek Brown. Derek Brown, he's actually a martial arts teacher for students. He actually checks on the grades, looks at them at school, makes sure everything okay. But what people criticize him for is he doesn't talk about how rap music is destructive in life. And all he said was that, it's not my choice to say, hey, don't listen to that because it's bad. It's everyone's freedom and creativity to listen to what they want, and you always have the choice of not listening to explicit songs. This is a good one. They say that students don't know any better. Students take the songs too seriously, and they end up following what the lyrics say. For example, Mr. Schwartz, he's a teacher. He had a student that was 17 that came to his fall semester class. And, he always thought this student dressed up really nice, but he sold drugs on the corner. Now, from a teacher looking at that, it's not the best thing for the student. But how I feel about that is he's learning business strategies. He's learning how to sell his product. He's looking how to dress professionally so people will come to him instead of running away. And no, yes, I understand that drugs aren't the best thing to sell, but who says he's going to do that the rest of his life? He's learning the strategies now to better prepare him for himself. They might not be the most safest way, but even though it's not safe, it's still a good thing to know for these students. And then lastly, I actually found an article that was right down the middle. They weren't talking about how bad lyrics are or how good lyrics are. This was talking about more of students should be careful what they post, which I feel is very strong. You know, yes, you have your freedom of right, you have your freedom of speech, and saying what you want, but just know that you can say what you want, but there's always some kind of repercussion because not everyone's going to want that in their environment. It's just saying watch what you say on the internet. You could post lyrics, but maybe blank out the cuss words, or give credit to those rappers so that they don't feel like you're the one saying that. And the students, there's a student in Nebraska that he posted it and got in serious trouble for, which is wrong because yes, you should talk to the students and say, hey, just be careful what you say, but to get severely punished for posting something that he liked, that's very not how our society should be. It should be be open to what you like and everything like that, and have other people open to that. Not everyone's gonna like it, but he shouldn't be severely punished for saying that. He should just be, hey, be careful what you post. Not everyone's gonna agree with that, but just be careful. Keep yourself open up to other people. Keep yourself open up for the future, and that is all.